Good evening. I'm with
Huh?
John Jekovich, 98-year-old World War II highly decorated veteran,
Stop it.
and we'll be working on his chapter 8 in his book called Their Mother's Son. And this chapter is in regards to crossing the English Channel. Crossing the English Channel. What would be your dog tag number?
What?
What's your number?
42092965.
You still have those dog tags?
Huh?
Do you still have your dog tags?
I don't have my dog tags. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what happened to all that stuff.
Okay, here we go. Picking up the last few pages of Crossing the English Channel. As we marched down for chow the last time, shouldering our duffel bags, the townspeople were up at this early hour, understood that we were leaving for good. They would give thumbs up, and some of the women would wave and throw us kisses. I wish that I could get a glimpse of Jean somewhere in all the well-wishers as we marched down the hill. After chow, we gathered outside the mess hall, waiting for 6x6s to take us to the port of embarkation. How many soldiers does a 6x6s fit?
Who?
How many soldiers does a 6x6 fit?
In the 6x6?
Yeah, how many soldiers?
Probably 50.
They must
50
be very,
with their equipment.
they must be very crammed.
Oh, yeah. And they're usually open, too.
Yeah, rain, snow, doesn't matter. I spotted Sergeant Tracy, the mess sergeant, shook his hand and said goodbye. He wished me luck and hoped that the war would be over soon. We talked once again about a ration of gifts to my English friends, and he stated that it was too bad that I could not stay here longer. Just then the trucks arrived, and I waved goodbye to him and boarded one of the trucks. In a matter of minutes, the company was loaded up as we were on our way. We all waved and shouted goodbye to the townspeople as we drove out of town on Highway A40. Was A40 a cement or dirt road?
Yeah.
Cement or dirt road? Highway A40 out of Haverfordwest. Was that
It's one of friends.
Was that a dirt road or a cement?
No, it's a highway. Paved highway. Germans put it in.
The same roadway Jean and I bicycled on several Sunday afternoons. The thought made me feel despondent and nostalgic that I would never see these familiar sights again. After we left the outskirts of Haverfordwest and settled down for a ride to the port, we still did not know where we were going, and in all probability would not know our destination until we actually arrived there. Is that pretty much how it is? You don't know where you're going?
That's right, yeah.
Everything's top secret.
Everything's top secret, yeah.
I closed my eyes and began to reminisce about all the little things Jean and I did while we waited for this moment. I kept thinking in a few short weeks, all my fond memories would be only faded, disjointed recollections, no matter how hard I tried to hold on to them. I did not want to lose any of them, but I kept thinking of my memories with Anne and how much they had lost their hold on me already. It saddened me to think that I would eventually think less of these moments until they became more difficult to recall. The small towns past were unfamiliar, even though there were friendly people in them. They would wave and throw kisses and give us the V for victory sign. They knew that we were headed for the channel crossing, and in a few short days we would take our position on the line, facing the common enemy. Leip was quiet, and I sensed that he realized the significance and reality of our trip, and he was contemplating his future, but be what it may. At the moment, as I looked at him, I felt uneasy, knowing that he did not belong here, and it was at an unfair disadvantage. My background and experiences prepared me for somewhat what we were facing, and I believed I had a better chance to survive all this. Lape's upbringing sheltered him and cloistered him. What mattered now was that he was alone and had to rely entirely on his wits and basic instincts to come through this. I hoped that he was sufficiently grounded in these areas, although I had my doubts. And once again, I resolved to look after him to the best of my ability and still keep myself out of harm's way. We've been traveling for several hours, and I figured we had gone about 25 miles, always going south towards the coast. The towns were getting fewer, and now we spotted only scattered farms, grazing sheep and cattle. The people were all about, but still have to wave and greet us warmly as we passed them in the fields on the road. After several more hours, we entered a port city. When we stopped at an intersection, we asked the townspeople what town we're in. They answered with a friendly smile, Portsmouth. We were told that we were now berthing arrangements for the Army personnel and that we would bunk wherever we found a spot on deck. The trip would be short, less than 2 days, and we would have 2 hot meals each day. I was not enthusiastic about hearing this, but I knew things would get a lot rougher than this shortly. Lape and I found a spot and sheltered the wind and set our packs down and stretched out on the deck, waiting to get underway. We did not have to wait long, as it was only a few hours after we arrived by truck that I felt the motion of the ship freeing itself from the moorings. It was all done very professionally, with no fanfare or much bustling about whatsoever. Before we knew it, we're out in the channel, heading due east for the coast of France. When you're in the English Channel, heading to France, did you have any type of enemies firing at you?
No.
None?
No, it was a big convoy. A convoy stretched
So you had
200
no
miles.
trouble on the English Channel getting to France.
That convoy was 200 miles apart.
As I rested on the warm deck, heated by the powerful diesel engines below, I thought Jean what she would be doing and thinking. She must have heard the news of our departure, and that we were gone for good. I wondered what she must be thinking of our not seeing each other again, and if she felt as despondent and dispirited as I did at the moment. I recalled how she looked at the time we went to dance, and many other times she appeared inviting and exciting. I wish I had said more to her about how I cared for her and wanted to see her again after the war, but I did not, as it was too late to make compensatory atonements. Just then Fink came by and asked how we were doing. I said great, with an air of annoyance and pleasure. God bless you. At the prospect of sleeping out on the deck tonight, hoping it would not rain, he informed us that he was bunked out at the fantail, and if we needed to make a trip aft to see him, he had also brought over several packs of K rations to tie us over when we landed. He reminded us that our first meal on board would be at 1,800 hours, providing all went according to the schedule, and that it was all on a contingency basis. We talked some more, and then we left to check on the rest of the squad. Lape looked over the K rations and retrieved all the dinners. I protested somewhat and reluctantly gave back 2 dinners. I did not object since I was not hungry. Besides, the breakfasts and lunches were just as good, or just as bad as the dinners. By now we're out of sight of land, and the sun had disappeared behind the low-lying clouds, which were quickly gathering all around us. The weather had turned from a sunny, brisk winter day to a cloudy, darkened mid-afternoon. The sea also started to churn up, as did the wind from the north. I was glad I had to put on my long johns that morning before we left Haverfordwest. I also taken my wool cap and gloves from my duffel bag and stowed them in the hold. Luckily, I was wearing ODs with a long sleeve wool undershirt under my shirt and field jacket over it. I was confident that I would weather the night comfortably. I admonished Lape that he would inform me that he not put on his long johns, nor did he take the wool cap or gloves from the duffel bag for the cold night ahead. This was just another example why Lape was such a hassle. He never thought ahead, even if it meant his own personal welfare. Luckily, we had shelter hafts and light packs, and we would afford some warmth tonight, providing it did not rain or turn bitterly cold. I suggested we walk about the ship to get our bearings, and more to the point, find out where the galley was, since it would be dark at 1800 hours, and the ship would be blacked out. The only thing I did not bring was a flashlight. I immediately thought of Gene and our first encounter. We searched out other members of the squad. They were all pretty much bunched up in one section in the ship. We informed them that we would meet them here a little before 1800 hours and go to chow with them. Varela, one of the ammo bearers in the second squad, looked somewhat dejected as I asked him how he's doing. He smiled rather sheepishly and said he was not doing too well. He was concerned about next 5 days. Besides, he got terribly homesick and missed his parents and 2 brothers and sisters. I said that we all felt the same way, and that just had to stick it out and do the best we could. Things would not be that bad, and before you knew it, we'd be on another ship heading for home. I sort of fibbed when I told Varela we all felt homesick. I did not feel homesick as such, nor the way I did when I was entered the Army. Naturally, I was concerned about Mother and Sally, especially during the winter months. My main concern now was the departure from Ann and Jean and my ambivalence towards them. I felt I should have a more permanent provision with either one of them, and 1 or 2 separate occasions I could not do that. This would frustrate and disturb me to no end for a very long period. I made a mental note to keep an eye on Varela and try to help him over the rough spots. Whatever happened to Varela?
Varela?
Yeah, whatever.
He got shipped out earlier.
Why did he get shipped out earlier?
Right?
What happened to him? He said he was homesick. Varela.
Varela, yeah. Italian, yeah.
Why did he get shipped out?
Well, he was sickly. He's been in the hospital a couple of times. I guess they can put him in the hospital when he gets home.
So he wouldn't have been a good fighter.
Well,
huh? And try to help him over the rough spots. We made a complete circuit of the ship, and since the lower decks were off limits to the Army personnel, we arrived at our designated spot and plunked down to watch the day turn into night. I felt colder. I reached for a wool knit cap and gloves and put them on. Lape gave me a whipdog look, and I only turned away and searched the sky for an aircraft. A little bit before 1800 hours, we met back with the rest of the squad and headed for the gallery.
huh?
It was hard to find the blacked out condition on the boat shipped at a pungent, unsavory smell preceded its location. It was a small galley in comparison to one that large troop ship had been on in a crossing the Atlantic. It has the same basic elements that the stand-up tables with no sitting benches. All there are only 6 long tables. Near the entrance of the galley was enough to take your appetite away. We finally reached the serving line and took our small trays and utensils. I was really ready for some fresh air. With only 6 serving tables, it was a question of waiting in line. Enough space became available for the 10 to 15 men to stand and eat. The people began to serving counter at the British Navy personnel, and they did not appear too friendly or talkative. So the British personnel weren't too friendly? British personnel on the ship weren't too friendly?
Yeah, they did that. That's all they did, ship these people around.
They plunked various concoctions on our trays, and I did not have the slightest idea what they were. I found out later the meal was lamb mutton stew, boiled potatoes, Brussels sprouts, and a biscuit for dessert. So which one of those did you like? Did you like the lamb mutton stew?
No, greasy.
Greasy? How about the Brussels sprouts?
Brussels sprouts, well, they couldn't do much with that. Cook it and that's it.
So that was not bad.
No.
The only item in my estimation that was edible was the hot tea, and I drank approvingly. I noticed that most of the men did not eat much and left most of the food on their trays. I was thankful the Army had handed out K rations. I could also see that they would not last the time allowed in them. I also noticed that there were no officers on the mess. Neither Sergeant Rupert or Sergeant Whalen were present. As for a matter of fact, neither T5 Eckert this irked
Well,
me.
you didn't see Goodnight after that.
Didn't say good night. This irked me somewhat, but I kept it to myself. I became more perturbed when I realized that the entire headquarters platoon was not present. If they're not present, where were they? The headquarters platoon.
Yeah.
If they're not in a ship, where were they? Where would they be?
For the woman?
No, you said the headquarters platoon was not present on the ship. Where would they be?
Headquarters platoon?
Yeah.
They were advanced party. They were back where the hell we were supposed to go.
I visualized T5 Eckert with his smirky face eating a large steak, comfortably seated at a dining room table with Sergeants Whalen and Rupert and all the officers that we had. So the top brass got a lot of different meals than you did?
They got the same meal, but they didn't sit with us.
Okay, because you said this guy was
Yeah.
you picture him having a steak.
Yeah.
The combination of the boiling, steaming cabbage and the mutton stew, along with the evaporated boiling water, used to sterilize the eating utensils, made me nauseous. I wanted only to get out of the immediate. I only wanted to get out of the immediate area. I dumped the food into a large garbage and slid an empty tray along the narrow metal counter where a Navy messman quickly immersed it into the awful smelling water and disinfectant. This made me even more queasy, and I quickly headed for the door and the fresh air on the open deck.
Right.
There were some men mingling about of the area, and I waited for the rest of the squad to come out. Shortly thereafter, Lape came out looking for a little green around. Shortly, Lape came out looking a little green around the gills and walking erratically. I asked him what the matter was, and he quickly replied that he did not feel well and was sick to his stomach. I said a little fresh air would fix him right up, even though it was not helping me one bit. We waited for the rest of the squad. And in short order they all appeared, feeling worse from the ordeal of their first meal on board a Navy British ship. We headed for our individual bunking areas, and the general consensus was to lie down as soon as we got there. None of us felt too well, and the acceleration and rolling and pitching of the ship did not help matters any. The sea had gotten rougher and the sky had blackened considerably, which not even the moon was showing through. It appeared as if we were in a huge dark cave. It felt like a huge dark cave on that ship.
Huh?
It felt like a huge dark cave on that ship going over the English Channel.
What's that?
The ship you were on going over the English Channel, you described it as a huge dark cave. It was a very uncomfortable ship.
Oh yeah, it was jammed up. It was jammed up. It was no luxury ship. It was jammed into the troop ship.
That impression would not have been reinforced more had it not been for the turbulent movement of the ship and the noise of the diesel engines. I spread one of the two shelter halves on a warm deck and using my light pack for a pillow, stretched out with a wool knit cap and gloves. Leip did the same, minus the cap and gloves. And then they threw the remaining shelter halves over us to cut out the wind and afford some warmth. I closed my eyes, attempting to think of something else besides the pain in my stomach, hoping that Lake and I would not throw up. I thought of Jean and how we would huddle against one another as we sat on the bench listening to planes overhead. I thought of how I missed all of that and that I had not appreciated it well enough. Leip got up several times to dash to the ship's rally. He would have dry heaves and over the side and then return, moaning slightly and bad-mouthing the Army for getting him in this dilemma. I mentioned that it would get a lot rougher than this before it was over with, one way or another. Since I did not want to carry on conversations with Leip on his misfortunes in the Army, I turned my side facing the bulkheads and pretended I was asleep. It was not much later that I heard Leip snoring on his back. I only hoped that he would not throw up while asleep. Oh boy. The cold night air was not that menacing, as the sheltered halves protected us from the wind and some of the dampness. As I lay there, I thought about Anne and wondered if she ever thought of me. The very thought of Anne felt as if I was in another world, light years away from her and all the memories of the times we got together. There too, I also did not appreciate my good fortune and did not capitalize on the build upon it. It could still conjure up some memories of the place and the events we shared together, but gradually it was becoming entangled with my experiences with Jean, and it became obscure and confusing. Leip's snoring became annoying, so I got up, laid the open shelter half against him, and began to walk down the deck area. There were some people about, mostly from the 3rd Platoon. I chatted with them for a while, and then they moved to the stern of the ship. I came upon Fink leaning against the rail and asked him if he could not sleep also. He smiled his usual smile and said rather thoughtfully that he was not sleepy. Besides, he was standing by the railing in case he had to go. I turned toward the open sea and said, "You two, I bet everyone is sick on this tub, and it'll be thankful when we get off of it." He agreed with me, and it was here that I mentioned the absence of officers on non-coms. He related that the scuttlebutt was that they were not even on board, but were on a much larger American ship with private quarters and first-class meals. I sarcastically replied that was the Army. Rank and has this privilege. He agreed. I also mentioned Varilla's despondent mood and exclaimed that he too noticed it and would keep an eye on him. I said I would do the same, providing we had the opportunity to exercise our concern over him. He said he knew what I meant, and that asked Lape as I sat he was griping as usual about the Army and a lousy deal it afforded him. Outside of that, he was asleep, snoring up a storm. We both chuckled, then talked about what lay ahead of us the next few days. He did not have much information to provide, as there was no higher authority to brief him and the rest of the squad leaders. All he knew definitely was that when we left the ship, we would rendezvous somewhere on shore and form up in a division pattern. For us, that would be 291st Infantry, Regiment 2 Battalion, and we'd adhere to the TO Table of Organization until further advised. Fink also mentioned that it would take several days to regroup the entire regiment, as they were scattered about. He said they would take post several days to find us and hope we did not lose our trailer in the process. What took place after that was anybody's guess and was entirely up to a higher echelon. We then talked about Breckenridge, Owensboro, and Evansville, and the girl we had met there and occasionally written to. He then mentioned Haverfordwest and meeting Jean at the dance. He wondered if there was anything serious between the two of us, since we were so compatible, and she certainly was attractive and pleasant. I stated that we were close, but nothing serious developing, like marriage or even engagement. I then asked Ann, for I knew that he was aware of by seeing Ann frequently on pass. He did not comment much on Ann, but politely and tactfully skirted around the subject. I appreciated his tactfulness. It was one of his traits. I admired him. We talked about home. He mostly, and I just listened occasionally, with something he would say or make a small comment. I still did not feel comfortable to anyone about my home life, and I guess I would come out in my hesitancy to approach the subject. We finally agreed that we wished we were somewhere else, preferably back home rather than here. With that profound statement by both of us, we agreed that this is getting late and we better get some sleep. I enjoyed talking to Fink, and I was thankful for the times we had together, considering what was about to happen in a very short while. I reached my area and I could hear Lape snoring from the distance. I rearranged the shelter halves and crawled under my half, getting out of the cold, damp air. The motion of the ship lurching in a rough sea put me to sleep instantly.